thoughts on what happened yesterday? Many have described it as unfortunate, others say it was just unexpected, is one of those things. What do you think?
Well, each of these, first of all, thanks for having me. You can describe the incident in many different ways. Unfortunately, for me, it's still baffling. I still cannot comprehend that after decades of experience in organizing recruitment events, what happened yesterday happened. Remember, El-Wak is a military sports stadium, so we know the architecture very well. The armed forces were the planners. They knew the numbers that they were expecting. So the fundamental question, was it reasonable or reasonably possible that in one working day, yesterday, the armed forces could have processed the 21,000 at that facility, given that the gates were not open 24 hours. I was moving from wherever, from 37 to Burma camp yesterday. It's a huge traffic jam from the Army mess towards the Lands Commission. Of course, at the tail end, you couldn't fathom what was going on until you managed to cross the traffic lights. Then all of a sudden, you saw this crowd of youth in white T-shirts and then black, what do you call it, traffic suit pants or whatever it was. All of them gathered outside, right outside the wall of 37, El-Wak. Some on the side of the airport. Others who had seated themselves in the median with their feet on the roof, which was even scary. That a reckless driver mistakenly could, run over some of them. So I went to Burma camp, and then sometime later I heard that 6 people were dead. Fundamental question is, was it reasonably possible to process 21,000 individuals? When I was returning from Burma camp on a sister radio, I heard that the recruitment board had set up 9 tables, which would have been the clearing point, the first point of contact. So there could have been 9 queues. The problem was that with the crowd outside the stadium, everybody was eager to enter the stadium grounds. I don't know the number of gates that El-Wak has, but I know it has a bigger gate to the right as you face it. And then it's got maybe 2 or 3 other smaller gates. So it was that stampede, that eagerness to go through the gate and enter the stadium grounds, which ended up with 6 people being crushed to death. We don't know the planning figures that the recruitment board has. But I'm assuming that even if one person took 1 minute before the 9 tables, for the 21,000, you needed 38 working hours to process all of them, each one taking only 1 minute. The fact of the matter is that we don't have 12 working hours in a day. We don't work from 6 to 6. I passed the 7, the gates were not open. So assuming that you work from 8 to say 5, how many hours do you have from 8 to 5? So assumedly, the armed forces needed more time, definitely more than 2 days, ideally, to process the 21,000. Which then brings us back to the fundamental question I asked. who estimated that it was reasonably possible to process 21,000. But at the same time yesterday, I heard a reportage from Bolga that 1,000 people had applied or had qualified and were processed at Bolga. I saw the stadium grounds. They were comfortably seated, although in the sun. So these are the questions that we're all trying to find answers to. But I wouldn't go ahead and say that the armed forces was efficient, failed. We want the answers. If they provide the answers and the answers are reasonable, of course, we will have that kind of discussion. But on the face of what we know now, the planning probably was not realistic.
See, first, who should be providing those answers?
Fortunately, the president had spoken, and the minister also spoke on the floor of the House. And both of them had said that there are going to be investigations. I think I've heard that the armed forces has also, it's reported that the armed forces has also set up a board of inquiry. I don't belong to the school which doubts the integrity of the armed forces to say that there must be an independent inquiry. The armed forces has investigated many, many, many cases, and has apportioned blame and then decided on the appropriate punishment. So I trust that the armed forces will conduct, an appropriate inquiry because it indicts the integrity and the image of the armed forces. If you listen to some of the statements people are making, in the media, they don't augur well for the image of the armed forces. And I'm saying I'm baffled because from the time of the colonial government, we've been doing recruitment. Historically, there was a year in which it was reported that there were 3,000 applicants at El-Wak. Between 3,000, 5,000 thereabout. And people thought that, why do you invite everybody from any part of the country to come to Accra? Not everybody is well resourced to find the transport money, travel from wherever to come to Accra. In Accra, not everybody has the resources and family connections or whatever to find a place to live. So that was a point in time when the armed forces said, okay, for purposes of equity, in any case, a democratic armed forces is an armed forces that reflects the composition, ethnic composition, other compositions of the society. So let's decentralize. At the time, there were 10 regions. So we started recruiting phase one at all the regional capitals. Yesterday, the recruitment had been decentralized. They were taking place at various places. The president spoke about Kumasi, I think, where he was. The media reported Bolga. And then another media reported Koforidua and so on. You see, the unfortunate thing is Accra, being the capital, always has the largest number. So if Bolga was 1,000, Accra had 21,000. By the way, the media has also reported that there were 60,000 applications nationwide and 50% failure rate. So 30,000 had qualified. Out of the 30,000, 21,000 happened to be in Greater Accra, El-Wak Stadium. The remaining 9,000 were distributed among the other 15 or so regions. So who planned that 21,000 people should congregate at El-Wak on the 12th of November with a kind of crowd management infrastructure? If I saw anything, I didn't see anything. All I saw was that the crowd was outside. The gates were closed. Apart from that, there was no other infrastructure. So at Birmingham, when the story broke, I was talking to other officers and said, oh, probably if they even had these barricades that the police use, you see, which is a mechanism for managing crowd. You enter many international airports and you see how, the queues are barricaded either with tapes or with metal, whatever it is, to to get the crowd to meander, in very small spaces. If there had been barricades, and from the 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. that some said they had arrived at El-Wak, and at the time they had met the military with megaphones, making announcements, that when you arrive, go here, go there, don't go here, don't go there. That would have been fine. But at that time that I was passing, which was about 7 o'clock in the morning yesterday, I didn't see that kind of arrangement. So the infrastructure for managing the crowd itself was probably non existent, to the extent that when the gates were open, and again, those who know the architecture of El-Wak will know there's a bigger gate, but there are two or three, probably not more than three, smaller gates. Those that would have been the choke point, or even the bigger one. So many people would wish that, okay, they could easily go through the bigger gate. So they would therefore go and congregate there. And indeed, the crowd behind the bigger gate was larger than the crowds at the other entry points. Very, very unfortunate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So even you, just a cursory look, were disappointed at the arrangements that are in place. So I guess you understand why people have gone ahead to assign blame, because it's easy to see that there was a problem with the way the matter was handled.
This thing we call expectation. The comments I heard yesterday and today is that, include the idea that people think that when it comes to organizing, the armed forces has got, the skills and the expertise to do that. So why didn't we find the infrastructure for managing the crowd yesterday? That I still cannot understand. For those who planned, I've seen two of the papers, relatives of mine. One had failed. The form had a red stamp on it. Failed, bold capitals. And then the second line had F9, then they named the subject, F9 March or whatever it is. The other four had a stamp, qualified, green stamp, capital letters. And my relatives were telling me we have received a message from there. So the armed forces is using technology, using push messages, targeted to invite, first of all, to inform the 30,000 who had failed. Therefore, you can imagine that the relative who failed, or whose, ward or daughter or whatever failed, was insistently calling me, which I refused to take, because I couldn't see how I was going to, tell anybody that, can you reconsider? You have failed. But the green one said, okay, qualify. Then they sent a message, okay, Asmesi must come to El-Wak Association so time. You ask him, is there anything that you can do? I didn't even respond to that message. So everybody else was going there, 21,000. Not everybody has somebody who can. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So armed forces knew that they were going to receive 21,000. If it had been a 6-march parade, let's assume for purposes of discussion, 6 March, the military would have been on the parade grounds the day before the night and the very early morning. They would have been there. So the military, under the circumstances, should have had a certain infrastructure outside the stadium including even the traffic, directing the traffic on the two towards Bemakam, away from Bemakam. And as I said, some of the youth were sitting in the median with their feet on the streets, on the road, which itself was not safe. So the absence of that safety infrastructure to try and manage the crowd, to meander them using the barricades and other enclosures and military police and loud bailers and this and that and that, of course, together with ambulances, together with arrangements for water, as you can imagine, this mobile, vendoring system, women carrying water, pure water, they were there, And the other reason that I'm a bit baffled is one of the recruitments that the former IGP, Mr. Dampare, did, one of them, I saw tentage erected at Tesano. I saw seats provided under the tents. And I saw water, bottled water. Yesterday, that infrastructure was not there. Maybe they were in the stadium, but outside, there was nothing. You see what I mean? So the 21,000 is not a small figure. And somebody has said that even the capacity of El-Wak probably would not be up to 21,000. But if the military had been there from 5 a.m., somebody said they arrived at 5:30. And as you arrived, you showed your form with a green stamp qualified. Then you were allowed in. You see, controlling the crowd that way would have eased the pressure on the people who had amassed outside of the stadium. Okay. So you arrive, you are allowed to enter, shown where you must go and stand or sit. There would have been no pressure. But as the pressure built up because the crowds kept coming and the gates were closed, the gates opened, everybody was eager. Although they were all holding green forms, everybody was eager to enter the stadium. In the process, 9 lives lost. It's a big lesson that we must learn. So people are now trying to conjecture in what other ways. And I mean, if you can do things in a very simple way, that's the best, way to do things. Okay. All the other things people are suggesting, this and that, which are going to entail excessive cost, which the country hasn't got the resources to provide for, all boiled down to the point that yesterday the safety infrastructure outside the stadium was non-existent.
Okay. How soon do you expect these questions that you are in your mind and you're asking to be answered?
So the questions will be answered. You see, it doesn't matter in which other way you present an investigative report. Let me give you one example. 24 hours before this incident yesterday, we had a report on the Z9 helicopter crash. The report indicated that weather conditions, adverse weather conditions, coupled with terrain features, were attributable to this terminology we call controlled flight into terrain. Before the investigation, I had written my paper. And then, fortunately, been invited to the Army Combat School to do a presentation last week. The fundamental question I raised before and after the presentation was, should the flight even have taken off? That's a fundamental question. Because the information from the presentation and the information available was that the weather was very, very adverse on the 6th of August. In the impact area, right, the cloud base was 600 feet, i.e. the cloud was hanging 600 feet above the surface of the earth. Those who were in the Sikaman village and were looking at the Dampia rainforest were saying that Aboagye. So the hilltop itself was, immersed in the fog. The presentation said for several times the pilot had to come down and go up and come down and go up. That flight was authorized under marginal weather conditions and therefore special flight, which would have required instruments that the helicopter did not have. So the basic question is, should the flight have taken off? The flight took off because there's another dimension which we call the president must go, in quotes. It's become a culture that the political class are organizing events and the communication squadron must take them there. That culture overrules the aeronautical decision making of the pilot or the captain of the flight. The presentation did not go to that depth. But when you take the information the presentation has provided, it brings you back to the pressure that the Ghana Air Force is under to fly political missions or executive missions. So let's wait for the investigations into this, disaster at El-Wak. On the face of the information, you can deduce many, many things. They don't need to come and say, people are saying the armed forces failed. I don't want to use that word. That the armed forces was negligent. I don't want to use that word. The armed forces are not disciplined. I don't want to use that word. Let's wait for the report. And when what the investigation is going to dig into from the planning up to the execution. They are not going to situate themselves at the El-Wak at whatever time and find out the second. They're going to go back in time and be asking people, what did you do? What did you plan? What was the basis of this decision that you took? So and so on. That is how the investigation is going to go. And all the officers who will appear will be responsible officers. So even if they lie, the investigation can, identify that maybe somebody is not. Well, the records are there anyway. It's 21,000.
Okay.
You cannot falsify that figure.
Okay.
You see, when the gates were open, the evidence will be there.
Okay.
And when the gates were open, how did you control? The evidence will be there.
Mm.
So I want to assure Ghanaians to be patient and not to be trying to indict the whole armed force, as is always the case. In the case of the helicopter, somebody said the armed forces is useless. You don't do that. The evidence, 2 days ago, showed that the armed forces is useless. The evidence doesn't show. So people will be paid. It's very, very unfortunate, highly unfortunate to have lost 6 lives. And if you have time, let me discuss this compensation regime that we have instituted. I don't know how much is going to be paid, but I won't be surprised that it will be in the region of 40,000, 50,000, something like that. These are youth. So maybe they are not even married. Remember that in the army, when you join the armed forces as an officer, you are not expected to be married. So they put you in single quarter. You live there alone. Even if you are married, your family should be somewhere else until you get a married quarter and then you move. So let's assume that they are not married. But they have dependents. Some have brothers, some have sisters, some have mothers, uncles, and so on and so forth. The potential future of these 6 youth, if they have succeeded in enrolling to become private soldiers, lance corporals, sergeants, staff sergeants, some of them warrant officers, class 1, class 2, senior warrant officer, this and that. That is how you compute compensation. The potential loss to the bereaved family. It is not to look at them and say, oh, these are 20-something youth unemployed. Their worth at this material time is so much. When their potential, I mean, even if they didn't have the recruitment, they didn't succeed, and they live their own lives, they would have survived. There are people selling pure water. Look, I have a relative, my brother's wife, or second wife. My brother passed away. The woman sells pure water, wholesale, or she breaks them down and gives to people to go and sell. Her daughter has gone to university, starting her national service. So we must not look at these pure water people as if they are useless.
Okay.
No, those who sell charcoal, those who roast plantain, they have economic livelihoods.
Okay.
They may not be as much as the person who dipped his hand into the national coffers and took $50 million.
Okay.
But many of them have sent their children to university. Some have become medical officers and all manner of degrees and qualifications.
Okay.
So I want to entreat our government, not this government, the government of Ghana, to be serious and fair about paying compensation.
Okay.
And now I won't stop there. That there are people who enter parliament, and nobody can tell any Ghanaian that the work that parliamentarians do is more important than the work that everybody else does. But every 4 years, they take away end of service benefit. We find the money to give it to them. When they go and they qualify the primaries and they come back, another 4 years, we pay them. So when they stay there for 14, 16, 20 years, they have taken multiple end of service benefits. That is not altruism.
Okay.
It's not that they are sacrificing. Like somebody was suggesting that, these people are coming to look for jobs. They are not coming to serve the nation. Who else in this country is serving its nation without being compensated? Who? Apart from the former finance minister. And even him will know the damage he's done. You see what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
So let's be measured in our discussions of these.
Okay, kind of.
Very, very unfortunate. It shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It's happened. We need to know the circumstances under which, the disaster happened. Okay. Then, of course, we need to put in place measures to ensure that in the foreseeable future, if we are not careful, it might happen again. You see?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ifosana. Historically, this is the first time I'm appearing on Gold.
Yes. Yes.
But my name is not on your protocol list. So.
Oh, no, not at all. No, but you attempted to speak to you on a couple of occasions. I think you engaged, especially during the Zena helicopter crash. We attempted, my producers tried many times. So now that we've got you, we'll be speaking to you.
Thanks for having me. I'll be listening to you sometimes. And my friend, I need to know who this person is. Konkonsa. Please tell him he should give him my number, or give me his number, and with his permission, I'll call him.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Colonel retired Festus Aboagye is a retired senior military officer joining us on the line. SM, deal with that. Because I want to ask Nee's view on this particular incident, especially because of the numbers involved. That we are looking. How many? You said 21,000 at that place alone. So it means that 21,000 people are looking to enter into the military. Is it for the purpose of the fact that they love the military, or that's the choice that's available to them? And because that one to go into the budget, employment matters. But before that, just go through the. You have gone to.
I don't know.